Okay, so we're going to go ahead and have a look at this Dell Inspiron, which has a faulty DC power port. So when the power's coming in, it just hasn't got much of a connection on it, honestly. So this process will cover. So you're going to need a 1.5mm Phillips screwdriver. So this is a typical one you get in mobile phone repair kits, but I'll put a link in the description to this particular screwdriver. Now these 3 screws at the back, they are captive, meaning they don't come out. So you just undo them, you don't remove them from the case. The remaining screws you do, and there's not too many of them. Okay, so that's all the screws out, and now you just need to get a spudger in around the edge just to release the clips that are there. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Should, to be fair, shouldn't be too much there. Make sure you don't push it under too far, because you don't want to be damaging any of the electronics. So you're just going around probably 5mm inside the edge there, and then yeah, that will come off. You can see what I mean. There's these clips just here on the side, which I just need releasing. That's what this tool will do. Okay, so to put that to one side, first thing you want to do obviously is disconnect the battery as soon as you open this up, and the battery is pretty clearly situated just here. I'm just going to flip this around so it's a bit easier to work on. Don't need to, but it's kind of good practice really. And it literally just pulls out like that. So the battery just plugs in just here, and you literally just pull out and plug back in. Okay, so now that's pulled out, you can see an awful lot of debris around this area. You can actually just about see there's an old repair here that looks like it's not been done very well, because you can see the solder blob there. So this is the DC jack that needs to come out. Now I will remove the screw holding it in place, but I believe I'm right in thinking that this screw where it's going into is actually broken. So we'll see, but we'll see. It's certainly very tight, that's for sure. Unusually so. Unusually tight. So that is definitely a different size there, so keep that separate, that screw there. Now to get access to the wire, comes from the DC jack, comes under this little plate here which supports the screen, and it comes around and into the main board here. So to get access we need to remove this bracket here, and actually quite a few other bits as well. So just take a fair amount of force to get it up. Now you'll note now that I've lifted it up, that's not the end of it, because the cable actually goes underneath the main board here. So you've got to lift the board up at this point in order to get the cable underneath. So there's 2 ways to do it. You can either just undo 1 or 2 screws on the main board, but I would prefer to do this properly and just remove the whole thing, honestly. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. First thing I'm going to do probably is just to remove this battery completely, I think. Just 4 screws securing the battery in. Now, obviously keep the screws for the battery with the battery. So now we can start to remove all of these kind of ribbon cables, and they all have different sort of ways of operating. So this one here, this is really simple. There's a little black kind of plastic line here, and that's actually the clip holding it down. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. So you need to raise that up. You can do it with your fingernail, and you see how I've just done that. That's now vertical. So now we can go ahead and pull on this plastic blue lug there and pull that away. Okay, we can do the same with this one over here, only on this one over here, the black is again the bit you pull up, so the white is the bit you don't mess with. Again, I can do it either with my fingers or with a pair of tweezers. Just push it up and then just pull that out like so. That's the touchpad there. So this one here, you actually lift up the white part, and the sort of dark grey part remains stationary. Once you've done that, you can then you will need a pair of tweezers probably to go in and remove that from there. So that's those little clips there. Now the next thing is we've got this is actually the hard drive of the computer here. So we need to just go ahead and release the screw on there and remove the hard drive. Solid state drive, very small. Okay, and you'll see there's a bit of a spring action there. Pull that to one side. Okay, then we've got another connector just here, and this is the speaker connector here, so we can just go ahead and all you need to do is pull this, but what I'm going to do is use my tweezers to bear on these little shoulders just here, and sort of pull backwards in that fashion, like that. So there it comes, that's nice and easy as well. Now if we come over here, we've got the Wi-Fi card. Now the Wi-Fi card doesn't need to be removed, but the antenna leads do, so we'll just get on the Screw head there, remove the little cap. Now make sure you don't get the Wi-Fi card and the hard drive mixed up. They do look very similar. Not the same, but very similar. And if you haven't done this before, easy to get them mixed up, so just be careful. The Wi-Fi card obviously is the only one with these two little connections on. Now these are quite delicate, you have got to be quite careful. I generally raise mine up from the rear, from here, rather than from the front. Just a little bit more structural integrity to the connector at that point. So just go ahead and just push up underneath there, and that way it comes nice and easy. You can do it with your fingers. I just prefer to. I'm just doing it like this to show you really. You can do it with your fingers. The trouble with using your fingers is you tend to be more blunt than that. So it's wise to use the tweezers if you can. And then that just comes away. So. As it's loose, you can then remove the Wi-Fi card. You could just screw it back down as well if you wanted to, doesn't matter. Okay, now there's only one fan on this PC, so we'll go ahead and we'll remove the fan and unscrew the fan next. So we've got this little black connector just here, and so again, similar to this one over here, we're just going to use the tweezers to bear on these two sort of shoulders, one here and one here, pull backwards, and then it should just come back as we do that. So, like so, nice and simple. Now just remove the screws. So there's one there, that one there, and there should be a second one, yeah, over here. Just two screws on that one, and just lift the fan right out, and obviously keep the screws near it. Okay, so now you can see this big connector here. It's actually quite easy to remove this one. This one just needs to be pried off the board. Okay, so just get the connector underneath, that's it, just pulls off like that. Simple as that. Nice flat connector, just pushes on and just pry out with a pry bar. Then we've got the heatsink here for the processor and the connector to the processor here. If possible, I'd try to remove the whole board and the heatsink all as one. It just saves messing about with getting this replaced on the processor and all of the associated, you're having to get the right paste, heat transfer paste and so on, because if you don't do that it will overheat. The final thing we have to do is obviously we do need to disconnect this connector that we're trying to replace here, even though we can't quite reach it under the board yet. So again, just bear on the outside ears of it and just push away like so, to be careful not to scratch your PCB with your tweezers. And that's now disconnected, but as you can see it goes right under the board, you can't just yank that through. There's one more connector just here, which is the battery for the real-time clock on the board. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out as well. That's by any custom BIOS settings and so forth, probably will be safe, but the clock will not. This keeps the clock going. Now we go ahead and remove these screws holding the main board down. Second one here. Okay, and finally, LCD monitor connector here. So you just lift this little tool up here, and then you want to push it backwards like this. Okay, so you just put it backwards and out. That's how it connects into this connector here in this direction. Okay, now that the LCD monitor cable's removed, there's another cable here which is also for the monitor. I think one of them is data, one of them is power, something like that. This one's slightly different in that you have to just lift up the little black bit of plastic there in the same way as you did over here. So again, it's just, show you again, you just get underneath the fingernail or something and just flick it up, and then you just push the whole cable backwards, and it will just come out. Little force needed, and that's now out completely. Now we can go ahead and remove the whole motherboard from the PC, and there it is. So now that we've actually got access to this DC jack, we can now go ahead and actually take it out. Now you'll note that there's actually a little sort of gateway here that it's going through, and this particular one happens to be lodged very severely in that gateway. Somehow it's stuck right in there. There it goes. So there it goes, comes out. You can see that that's actually broken off inside. Okay, now there are a couple of different power leads and DC jack assemblies that you can get for these. So I'm just going to check that the one I've got is the correct one, because it is possible to order one that's very similar but not quite the same. So I'm just got to check that you can see how the connector is different. So on the one I've bought from Amazon, it's got this sort of chunky wide connector. On the one on the computer, it's actually got a more narrower connector. It doesn't quite look the same. So what we want is another one that actually does look right. So I'm going to go ahead and order the right part up, and we'll see you back shortly. Okay, so now I've got a replacement part, the correct part, so it looks like this. You can see that the connector looks quite different to the old one. I'm going to secure this in place. Obviously the screw hole needs to be the side of the screw thread. There's a little plastic sort of lug just sitting out there, and the cable, battery cable, wants to go in between that and this bit of plastic here, so it wants to be routed in this channel here. There it goes. There we go, that's a bit easier. Now that that's up, that's a bit easier. Okay, there you go, you can see the plastic channel just there. Okay, so that's kind of pressed into place now, but we're just going to square that up slightly, and we'll just screw that in now. Okay, you can get that up fairly tight. So that's in, secured. So now what we want to do is put the main board and the motherboard back in, because then the motherboard will be going over this part of the cable. So now we can go ahead and put the motherboard back in. It's just a case of just getting all the cables and everything over the top, including obviously the new battery cable you've just fitted, and then sort of sliding it this way. So just want to make sure that all of our cables aren't going to get trapped underneath. And that can be a slightly frustrating process, but have patience. Okay, there we go, that's located quite nicely. So now we can go ahead and screw the motherboard in. Okay, so that's great. The next step is to connect the new battery connector that you've just applied. Do note that it's this flat bit here which goes in on the top, and the bit here with all of the connections there, with all of the little tabs there, that goes on the bottom facing the PCB. Okay, so do be careful of that. And it's literally just a case of offering it up and then pushing it in with a bit of brute force, basically. You are going to need to push that rear part of that cable down, because you're going to have this coming over it in a moment. So you're going to have to push that, make sure that rear part of that cable is properly pressed down. I'm actually just going to, I'm going to leave the battery connector connected. I'm going to take these screws out of the main board, and I'm just going to put it through a little bit, because there's too much of that cable sticking up. It's going to fail on that monitor support bracket there when we screw it down. Okay, so got a bit of flexibility now. I'm just going to bring this out slightly. Okay, and I'm going to keep it connected, but I'm just going to pull that cable just a little bit further forward, like about there. Okay, so you can see that there's a fair old kink in that cable there, taking up the slack on this side. So there's less available here to sort of rise up and fail. So that hopefully should be okay. Just going to keep that pushed down there, and now with the board attached to that, we're going to offer it back up. Do you remember the Wi-Fi antenna? It needs to feed underneath the heatsink here, so that's important to remember. And we can just pull these through, so they're clear. Okay, that's a lot better. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better. We can definitely work with that. So we can get those screws back on now. So I'm going to just really press down on that. As you can just about see, there was a screwed insert in this bit of plastic just here, and unfortunately the bit of plastic is broken. It's just a bit loose there. So I'm actually going to go get some Araldite. I'm going to set it in here, some quick drying Araldite. I'm going to set it in here and maybe a touch just in there, and then we'll get that threaded insert back in, and then we can reassemble everything else. Right, so we'll try and put in the threaded insert in. I'm going to leave that as it is to set, and we'll put everything else back while that sets. Okay, so let's maybe start away from it. Let's start over here. This is the speaker connector, I believe. So the battery connector is definitely fine. So now we can go ahead and get the LCD connectors on, because they're very close to that area, so I'd like to get them done now. And it is just a case of just, with this one here, of just kind of offering it up and then pushing it in using this wire, using this kind of wire handle here to just pull it in this direction. And that's literally all I've done. And then once you've done that, you just push that wire down to the PCB, and it acts as like a clamp. That's it. Just needed a bit of extra pulling around that other side. So now that's on, that's not going anywhere. There it is. So this one is going to be, just pull that black bit of plastic up vertically, and then get the ribbon connector in. And then you're just looking for the two white ears here to just be sticking, and just slightly clamping it in this plane here to stop it slipping out this way. So these two white ears, if they're sitting behind the corresponding ears on the ribbon connector, you know it's good to go. And then just fold that over, push it down, and that's fine. So they're now all on. So we'll go ahead and get this LCD mounting bracket on. There's a little locating bit of plastic there to make sure it's located. There's a corresponding one there too. So we'll get this one in first, but loosely, and then we'll get the others in. So this one here is a case screw. Yeah, loosely, not hard, just loosely. And we'll get this one in. A bit more firm. Check that one just lines up. It just lines up. I have to say it's a bit tight, but it does line up. Okay. So now we can go round. I'll probably go in this direction because I want to do the Wi-Fi last. Let's get the keyboard in here. So this one here, you literally just use this as with your fingers, push it in the gap in between the top and the bottom of this white section, and then the black section will push down to secure it. Okay, as simple as that. Goes into that. It's almost like a very tiny letterbox sort of gap. I can see it's just coming out here slightly, so I'm just pushing it back in. So it's square, it's very important it's square, and that's held in nicely. And then this one here, very similar. You can see it's a bit more heavy duty. It's just got two conductors, 4 little finger connectors there, so that just slots in just there. And again, once it's in, you can push down on the white tab, that locks it in place, it's not going anywhere. Then we've got the touchpad. It's the same sort of idea. The black tab here is the first thing it sees instead of the white here, but it still needs to slot in. It needs to locate on the ears. You can just see the little cutouts there, and the bit of the blue, and the ears of the connector are just locating in those places. That's keeping it square, it's holding it in place. And now we can just push the black section down. So that's all good. This will be for the battery, and put the battery back on, so we can leave that for now. And then we've got this section here, which is USB, etc., HDMI. So a lot of high-speed signals coming through there, and this one literally just pushes down onto the board and is held there with friction. You can hear it click in there, nice and easy. Then before I put this one on, I'm just going to get the fan in just to make sure that we're all good on the fan. So the fan wants to connect in here, and I'm probably going to connect the fan in before I put the fan down, just make it slightly easier. It's okay, you don't need to, it's just my preference. Just gives you a little bit more manoeuvrability, see there, what I did there. So now the fan can sort of sit, and you can see that the plastic sort of lugs here at the back of the fan, they're guiding this high-speed cable from the USB and HDMI header to the main motherboard. So we just want to locate the little screw thread there onto that hole there in the fan. This one's already located. It's just 2 screws for the fan, and so while we've got it there, we'll just screw it in, and then we can get the electrical connectors on. So those 2 screws now in, so now we can definitely get this battery connected back. This is just for the BIOS, to make sure it doesn't lose the time and date even if the battery runs out, and other system settings in the BIOS. The one you'll notice is the time and date, so we'll have to reset that when we reboot the whole thing. Right, next I'm now going to get the hard drive in here and the Wi-Fi card in here. So the hard drive is very, very small, it's just that, and it's just got a very simple little screw to hold it in place. Okay, that's all good. And now we can get the Wi-Fi card in. Very similar looking one, but you can tell the difference on the Wi-Fi card is it's got these two little connectors for the Wi-Fi antenna. Stick that in, it should be all good. And then we've got on the Wi-Fi card, we've got this sort of metal brace to go across it, but you don't want to put that on just yet. You want to get the actual Wi-Fi antenna connections on first. Now you hear that click as I put it down? That was the screw thread here, just locating in that sort of cutaway on the PCB just there. That's nothing to worry about. That's what you want. You want that to be located well. So we'll just get this left one down here, and it's just a case of just getting it lined up. And then you can either do it with the back of tweezers, I think, which is quite a nice way to do it. Just push it down, and you hear how it clicked in, and it sort of went all horizontal at that point. That was exactly what we want. Same with this one here. Just hold it down with your bit of finger pressure, and then back of the tweezers, like so. You can use your fingers, but it can get a little bit hard to control with your fingers. It's quite easy to break those connectors if you're not careful. So I recommend using tweezers if possible. Now, you'll notice the way I'm putting this brace on that there's more metal this side than there is on this side, and that's intentional. That's how it's meant to be. It's meant to be located this way around. Okay, so just do pay attention to the orientation of that. So here is the battery, easiest part to swap out. To be honest, I might just get the connector in before I locate the battery in. So it is just a case of pushing it in. It literally just goes off and up like so, and then you can either use your fingers or with the back of the tweezers there. You'll need a bit of pressure, push it right in, get it right in there, and you can see that it's located because there's these white bits of plastic showing through and the metal cut out there. Then we'll get it located on its little screw threads. Okay, so that should be it. So we can now go ahead and get the case reverse part on. And if you remember, there was a number of clips we released when we took it off. So the first thing we're going to want to do, once we've got it in the right location, we just want to get a press down, and that'll get the clips engaged. There you go. You heard them all go pretty much at the same time. They're all the same screws. I'm only going to get them in halfway. If you remember, the screw thread for this one did look a little bit on the edge, so I'm just going to get these in halfway just to locate them. Okay, now we can do this one. Yeah, that's looking good. I think as it's coming in for an angle, it's all good. Okay, that's it. Let's give it a test and see what happens. And as you can see from the charging light, that is a successful fix. And that's it. That's how you fix the DC charging port on your Dell Latitude XPS laptop. Hope that helps. If this helps you, do please consider subscribing. See you in the next video.